Welcome to Product Momentum, a community of thought leaders and learners coming together to celebrate the product people who are shaping our way ahead. Inspired by our most pressing questions and insightful guests, we'll explore the challenges you face and offer practical, hands-on guidance your team can implement today. This is Product Momentum. Here are your hosts, Sean Flaherty and Paul Gable.
Paul, what a great episode with Holly. She's an old-time friend of the Product Momentum podcast.
Been on a few times, been at our conference. It's always a blast catching up with her. What were some of the things that you took away?
This, relationship between risk and how much evidence we should have when we're thinking about any major decision in the product.
Yeah. One thing that was humbling to hear, but always a good reminder, is that sometimes it's not always enough to be right. You also have to be persuasive. And it's a lesson that I'm continuing to learn, and I'll beat my head against the wall until it gets through one day. But
yeah,
Holly is such a great scientific mind, and the way that she approaches product is really a unique take. I think her voice is really needed in a space where there's so much ambiguity today.
Evidence-based.
Absolutely.
That's the key takeaway here.
Well, really excited to share this conversation with everybody.
Yeah, let's get after it.
Hey, everybody, and welcome again to the New York Product Conference. We're delighted to be joined by Holly Hester-Reilly, good friend of ITX. And
been on the podcast before.
Absolutely. Glad to have you back. And you just gave a really phenomenal talk about the science behind high growth products and how we can build better practices, evidence-based strategies into the teams that we're trying to lead. Before we jump into the conversation, can you share a bit about yourself, your background, with the folks who maybe haven't heard of you before and found your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working in product and tech for, I think, 17 years now. But prior to working in product and tech, I worked in chemical engineering research. So that's why my angle on product is about science, because I actually did academic research for 4 years, and I published a paper, and I thought I was going to be a lab scientist, and then that didn't work out. So I fell in love with tech startups because the pace of it is great. And the energy that people bring to it is so great. Yeah. And so that just inspired me. Yeah. And I've been at home ever since I made that transition. I've spent these 17 years in early stage startups, in growth stage startups, and then over the last many years also working with enterprises.
Yeah, that's so cool. One of the things that I'm paraphrasing slightly from a concept that you shared during your talk is that essentially intuition isn't some magical thing that just descends from the heavens and strikes us, from, a bolt from the blue. It might be unscientific in the way that we perceive it, but it really is based on evidence-based behaviors. Yeah. And you talked a bit about how the 3 pillars of your strategy and your teams start to unpack this, but that notion of intuition isn't magic, and my words, not yours, but
no, but I agree.
Can you talk a bit about more what you're sharing in how we can make these more deliberate instead of accidental practices in our teams?
Yeah. So I think, very much I agree. Intuition is not magic. And the people who have good product intuition, they built that up over time through lots of hard practice.
Yeah.
They learned real tangible skills with science behind a lot of them.
Yeah. Yep.
And so the things that I think about are the science of human behavior,
right.
The way that a human interacts with technology. I think about the science of organizations, management of organizations and how organizations work. I also think about complex systems and information flow.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different places where this comes out. And I just think that, there's so much that we can think critically about and write down and teach.
We'll talk about this more in a little bit, but just to cap this thought off, I think, if we're learning, if we succeed by accident, we should stop and pause and figure out what is it that we learned.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love, so one of the things I loved about what you said was it's not enough to be right. You also have to be persuasive. And that's one of the things evidence does for you.
Yes.
So there's a huge shift in lots of different industries towards evidence-based everything, right?
Yeah.
And I think building it in from the front, right from the beginning, it's an important and helpful tool, because it also makes you more persuasive. So if you know why you were successful, you can explain it with data.
Yeah.
Everybody wins from that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I honestly think after I've worked with so many startups, I think that all startup successes are a mix of skill and luck.
A little bit of being in the right place at the right time.
There's a little bit of that, and looking back on why the companies that were successful and trying to use that hindsight to develop, foresight for the future is so valuable.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, just wanted to take a quick break in today's conversation to share some exciting news about ITX's upcoming Product and Design Conference taking place Thursday and Friday, June 27th and 28th, right here in Rochester, New York. It's going to be held at the Memorial Art Gallery, and it's going to be spread over 2 days. Day one featuring a half-day design and product workshop series with Prerna Singh, John Haggerty, Ryan Rumsey, and Patricia Reiners. Day two is going to be a fantastic day of keynotes, headed up by John Maeda, VP of Design and AI at Microsoft, Denise Tillis, co-author of the new book, Product Operations, and Ryan Rumsey, CEO of Second Wave Dive and author of Business Thinking for Designers. Sprinkled in throughout the day of keynotes, we'll have the option to choose your own adventure. You can sit in on some live recordings of podcasts. You can network with some fantastic product and design professionals throughout the day, or catch one of our 3 fireside chats discussing some of the important themes and topics in our space that we'll be touching on throughout the day. To reserve a seat for you and a friend, or maybe treat your whole team to 2 amazing days of learning and networking, you can head on over to itx.com/conference 2024. That's itx.com/conference 2024. Looking forward to seeing you there, and let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I also love the concept of the making sure with every sprint you're building in
I love
the
that.
learning.
I was just about to go
Why
there.
are we not always doing that?
Yeah.
Like that just, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's one
Right.
of those things.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, and this is maybe putting you on the spot a little bit. I'm a little bit of a stickler for verb tense. I noticed that you specifically phrased it as, in every sprint, we should be cataloging what was built, what was learned,
Yes.
and what are we planning.
Yes.
And I'm curious if that was deliberate, if those verb tenses have a deeper meaning, or am I reading too much into that?
Oh, that's really fascinating. This might be a case of me having an intuition around it and not having, thought it through.
Real-time
but,
discovery. Here we go.
There you go.
Yeah. But I think, it is very much like when we sit down to do the built, learned, planning demo, I feel like what we built happened.
Yep.
What we learned happened. And what we're planning is like in progress.
Right.
Like to me, it's like it's not done because it's ever evolving.
Right.
And so I don't want to talk about what we planned. I want to talk about what we're planning.
Where my mind went when you shared that was immediately, the process sticklers, which we need. This is not a disparaging remark. We need Scrum Masters. We need project managers. We need those rigorous analysts in the system. But I think when all we're doing is taking temperature and tracking burn up charts, we end up losing sight of where are we going in the future. It's all about, kind of the poor implementation of OKRs. It's all part of this kind of self-defeating cycle with the best intentions, but it becomes a self-defeating cycle.
Yeah.
Well, it's not, you're trying to follow a prescription, but you're not, if you follow the prescription, you're not really going to learn anything.
Right. And should give you a path forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also love that you said making sure that you're learning. It's like you're creating a forcing function for it.
Exactly.
Which for me, when I think of the planning piece, so what you built, what you learned, what you're planning is going to now intuitively include what you intend to learn next. Like,
scientifically include.
What are you curious about?
Scientifically include.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the word. Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's exactly it. You're going to plan what you want to learn and what you want to build, not just one or the other, And so you should have a learning plan.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I think where that came, the point that you ended up making that I thought was a really great cap on that idea was, don't tell teams what to build, because then you rob them of the chance to explore and discover and create this sort of creative energy that only comes from open-ended questions and sometimes ambiguous challenges that they need to overcome. If every user story has acceptance criteria and test cases and everything written down and fed to the team on a silver platter, they might be operationally efficient, but they're killing their own creativity.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's not that fun. It's not really a fun way to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The outcome-based roadmap is one that I've adopted, and every product needs its own flavor roadmap. I'm also a big fan of the now, next, later and problem-based roadmaps. So it's kind of adapted to the problem at hand. But one of the things that I really liked about the times that I've leaned into the outcome-based roadmap is that it enables a lot clearer cause and effect, which other types of roadmaps tend to be more planning focused. And I think, one of the things that is really clear in the way that you've organized this strategy and approach to product management is not every outcome that we think we have to address always has to be one that we end up adopting. You kind of tied this into it's very expensive to learn which assumptions are wrong after delivery, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that an outcome-based roadmap can address is getting ahead of those assumptions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't always know at the beginning. You know, usually you can find some outcome that everyone can agree is important, but you probably have some hypotheses about some outcomes that you're like, I think this matters to our customers, but I don't actually know for sure yet.
Until you test it, until you put it in market and test it, none of us really know.
Yeah.
That's the truth. One last insight I got from your talk was this relationship between how risky is the problem here, how risky is it, and how much evidence do we have?
Yeah.
And the concept of one-way doors versus two-way doors. And if it's a one-way door, and it's a risky decision to make, we really better go gather some evidence.
Yeah.
And how often do we just take a stab at the dark and just build something and then see what happens? I just thought that was a useful way to think about what decisions require evidence and which ones, can we maybe just go try? Yeah,
exactly. And, companies tend to fall, I find, on one side of the spectrum or another, where either they over-index on research and they don't build enough, or they over-index on building and they don't research enough.
Yep.
And I really think it's a balance depending on the decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Even within a given product team or a given ecosystem, for sure.
So we just have a couple minutes left. I want to ask a practical question about how, there's an early career product owner, product manager, maybe hasn't developed that influence or persuasiveness, as you spoke about as well, in the organization, and they're trying to make their way and build out some rapport, build some team dynamics and trust within the organization. How can somebody early in their career begin to develop these skills? What are some ways that, the organization might not be set up for this kind of wholesale readjustment or reapproach?
Yeah.
What are some small ways, practical ways that people can take back to their teams and start to address these problems that you're talking about?
I mean, I think the first place to start, if you're on a team that's not really set up for this, is really to do some kind of small discovery research. And if you cannot get permission and space for that, then you can even start with interviewing people, that who have
guerrilla marketing.
Guerrilla marketing. Yeah. Doing some kind of that, you could reach out to people on LinkedIn who, maybe you don't get permission to do it, but you just say, I'm going to have a conversation. It's just a conversation. We're going to go out for coffee, and then you bring back those learnings and you sneak them into your sprint demo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
Love it.
Well, Holly, it's been a blast catching up with you. It was fantastic to see you sharing all these ideas and really moving the product community forward. Thanks so much for taking the time. Before we let you go, how can people get in touch with you? Where's some good places to track you down and learn more from you?
Yeah. So theproductsciencegroup.com and the Product Science Podcast. And you can also find us on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you as well. I've had such a pleasure every time I've worked with you too.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Holly.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, that's it for today. In line with our goals of transparency and listening, we really want to hear from you. Sean and I are committed to reading every piece of feedback that we get, so please leave a comment or a rating wherever you're listening to this podcast. Not only does it help us continue to improve, but it also helps the show climb up the rankings so that we can help other listeners move, touch, and inspire the world just like you're doing. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next episode.